Okay, well, welcome everyone. I'm Jay Lyman. I'm a librarian with the Seattle Public Library, and we thank you for being here tonight. I'm going to go ahead and just turn things over to Michael Coffey. He'll introduce himself and the topic, and thanks for being here tonight. You're muted, I think. I don't hear Michael.
That is because I muted myself.
Okay. I wondered if it was me.
At the headphone level, not in the.
Got it.
Hello, my name is Michael Coffey, and I'm the founder of Ardea Coaching. I help small businesses do mostly marketing things, but also other sort of like project management, things that are useful skills for small business owners to have. I have also taught project management at Seattle Central College. So we're just going to do a little overview of what project management is and how that can help you as an entrepreneur. So for some reason that did not advance the slide. Okay, if you have questions along the way, feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourself. Jay is watching the chat and will interrupt me if need be. I also have several places throughout where I will pause and ask for questions. So yeah, please feel free to jump in and have your comments or your questions. So today we're going to basically talk about four things. We're going to talk about the stages that a project goes through. We're going to talk about specific knowledge areas that happen in a project, or in not necessarily a specific project, but that will often come up in projects in general. We will talk about communication and culture. And so that's sort of the people part of having a project. And then we'll talk about different ways of keeping track of what's happening and what's the next step and those kinds of things. So those are the four basic sections. There we go. But first, what is project management? Well, first we should say, what is a project? And I'll say a project is anything that takes more than one step and has a desired outcome. Okay, so it's a really broad definition. Oops, I have another screen going here that was so broadly speaking, project management is making sure that that multi-step goal gets achieved. More specifically, it is a discipline or a profession that is focused on finding the most efficient way, the most effective way to complete a project within whatever constraints that there are. Oftentimes those constraints boil down to three things: time, money, and quality. But you might have other constraints, and you might not have, you might not have a time constraint, or you might not have a money constraint, or whatever. But oftentimes projects are constrained by those three things in general. Okay. The discipline of project management, or the profession of project management, has its roots in civil engineering. So that would be, I'm trying to build a bridge, or I'm trying to build a skyscraper, or, something like that, or a park. Business management, we're trying to launch a new product. We're trying to move into markets in another country, something like that. And so those broad ideas in those different professions kind of merged into what is now known as project management. Now, I will say that it does tend to be sort of a European, North American kind of, uh, uh, white culture sort of profession. When I was teaching at Seattle Central, I tried to find like organizations around the world because we had a lot of exchange students, and I could find none in Africa. I could find no organization for project management in Africa at all. And I think I only found one that was common in Asia, and it was in Japan specifically. So it's not a profession, a separate profession everywhere, but here in the US, it is recognized as sort of its own specialty. And it developed that way in the 1950s. So it's a fairly recent development in terms of being its own job. Architecture is much older than project management as a profession. But basically, it's about finding a balance between order and chaos. And I boil it down to these two things because there are benefits and drawbacks at both ends of this spectrum. So let's think of order, right? Order is great. You can have control over things that are ordered. You can predict things that are ordered, and that's very useful. But too much order, and it starts to be stifling. It starts to be rigid. It starts to be difficult. On the other hand, chaos is great because it's creative and it's flexible. But it's also none of the things that we said were good about order, because it's unpredictable, and and so you want to have a little bit of chaos, and you want to have a little bit of order, and you want them to be dynamic. You want them to be playing with each other. You don't want to go too far in either direction. Okay, so but what the project is will dictate in part where that balance is. And we'll talk a little bit about that at the end, how that works. But if you are doing some kind of creative project, we're going to do a mural. Okay, great, doing a mural. That probably suggests more chaos because it's a creative related project. If you are building critical infrastructure that is going to protect people's lives, you probably don't want to be as creative there. You kind of want to cross your T's and dot your I's and make sure everything is done right. And so then maybe order is where you want to lean. So different projects require a different balance. So that's what a project is and what project management is. Are there any questions at this point?
And you can type them in the chat. You can ask them out loud, and I will repeat them out loud.
What Jay said. Okay, well, then I will move on. So the first concept that we will talk about are the stages of a project. And so this concept is about time or progress. And that's one aspect of a project, is that it happens over a period of time. So the first stage that any project goes through is initiation. And initiating a project is primarily about who are we? Who is, who are the stakeholders? Who are those that are going to be impacted or care about this project? Who will it benefit? Who's going to do the work? Those kinds of questions. Who are you and what are you doing? It involves often making a charter of some sort. We are these people, we are trying to accomplish this. It might determine some of the parameters. What is the overall budget? What is the overall goal? What risks do we have to look out for? Where's the money coming from? How much money do we have? And other resources. It doesn't just have to be money. How will it benefit the community or whoever we're trying to do this for? Okay, so that's initiating. It's just figuring out, like, what is the project? The second step, which is different, it's a different thing, is planning. So initiating may have sounded like planning, but it's just defining the problem. Planning is, now that we know what we're trying to do, we're going to develop a scope. And the word scope is very important to project managers. So scope answers the question, what is in and what is out? What are we going to do? And critically, and often overlooked, what are we not going to do? And that's often missed in planning a project, is saying this project is not this and not that, because that keeps you from, if you can draw a line and say what is outside that line, then you are less likely to go over time or over budget. So having a scope is important. Knowing what quality you want is important. And then starting to figure out, how do I get from here to that now more well-defined goal? Okay. So planning, and we will talk about a few ways of doing planning, but right now I'm just going over the stages. 3 is executing. That's just doing it. when people think of doing a project, they're thinking of the execution stage. So that's when, the orders get placed for materials and people, make stuff and do stuff, and checks are written to pay the bills and all of that. Okay. It's the work. Now, simultaneous to the executing, well, lagging just a little bit behind, is the monitoring and controlling. So as you're doing the stuff, you're rolling out your new product, you're building the new building or whatever, you want to have someone who's paying attention to those boundaries that you have set. Are we producing this at the right level of quality? Are we overspending? Are we going too slowly? Are we going too quickly? Are we, like whatever those questions are, there should be some monitoring of the execution so that you can make little adjustments as you execute to try and get to that end point. And then finally, closing. Closing is when you are done executing the plan and the project is coming to an end. In an ideal case, the project has been successful. Yay! You have your little party or whatever, and then you clean up and you put things away and you write the last checks and you turn off the lights and you lock the doors. Okay, done. Or sometimes, and I have been witness to the aftermath of someone who did this, which is just you turn your back and walk away and let it all burn to the ground. That also is a form of closing a project, but generally that's not recommended. We would, usually prefer that people come to an orderly conclusion. Yeah, and in terms of businesses, the let it all burn to the ground is sometimes how businesses if you see a business as a project will close. Like people will just shut their doors and with unpaid bills on the counter and just walk away, like that happens. So and a lot of people don't like that. So but that's kind of, every project kind of has some version of these 5 steps. They might be informal, they might be formal, they might take a long time or a short time, but all projects kind of have this shape. Okay. Let me see if I covered everything. I think so. There's an organization called the Project Management Institute, or PMI, and they have produced a book called the Project Management Book of Knowledge, or the PMBOK. And these 5 stages they call process groups. Okay, because each of these is a different kind of process. Initiating is a process. Planning is a process. And there are little sub-processes as well. So like planning the budget is a planning process, but planning what your resource needs, your other resource needs, materials, that would be a separate process that might be able to go simultaneously or interact with each other or whatever. Okay, so and the PMI is the most common project management organization in the US. It's known in other countries, but it's kind of like the #1 place. It's the one to go to for the US. So, and you can check out the Project Management Book of Knowledge, the PMBOK, at the library. In fact, I have done so on more than one occasion, because it's kind of a pricey book, but you can borrow it for free with a library card. there's my plug for the library. um, okay. Oh, did I have a, yeah. So let me pause there again for additional questions. We might get through this a little bit quicker than some of the other classes because a lot of this makes sense. Like a lot of this is sort of common sense and doesn't require a lot of, describing technology or things like that. But I want to check in and just make sure everyone's doing okay.
Any questions? I'm working on getting a link to the PMBOK into the chat, of course, because Michael knows that's
Oh
how
yeah.
it works. And I am seeing we have ebook versions of it, and it looks like we might have it in different languages too. So I'm just confirming that. But
Oh, interesting.
yeah, and as recent as 2021 copies in the collection as well.
Nice.
I'll put a link to to all of them in the chat.
Cool. Thank you. And I will continue since we don't have a bunch of questions. I will say also that the PMBOK has a lot of stuff in it, which we will see shortly. But they will themselves say these are all ideas of sort of best practices that you may want to pull out of your toolbox and use for your project. But there's virtually no project that exists that uses all of it. So the PMBOK is a toolbox. It is not a guide. You have to check box, everything in here in order to be doing projects right. That's not what it's for. You'll get a whole lot of order and get bogged down in all of that stuff if you try to do everything in the PMBOK all at once. Okay, so this second, if that first concept is about progress through time, this is about different skill areas that people might have. So this might be more like if you're hiring people to do this project, each of these knowledge areas might be a different person with a different specialty. And like I've said here for the first one, it says integration. Okay. In the PMBOK, all of these words that will be bullet points are actually described in the PMBOK as project whatever management. So the first knowledge area is project integration management. And project integration management is looking at the areas where things overlap. So when you buy materials, that's a resource thing, but it's also a financial thing, right? Those two things overlap when you are purchasing boards or, lumber, whatever, glass, sand, whatever you buy. That will happen, two different things. Those two things need to be integrated for that task to happen. Okay. Second one is scope. We talked about scope. So project scope management is, looking out for, are we adding too many features? If you have been a programmer ever, you have probably heard the phrase feature creep, which is Oh, we could do a button that does this, and oh, we could add a menu item that allows for that, and oh, we could do, and pretty soon the very simple thing you were trying to do now does 158 additional things, none of which was part of the original scope. And that means that there's been wasted time, that there's been unnecessary labor, that you're not doing this project as effectively because you're not paying attention to scope. So project scope management is just kind of like watching the borders. Okay. Schedule. Schedule, there are people that are better with time, and there are people that are worse with time. And scheduling, like this needs to come before that, and all of those sorts of things. And again, different projects need to have different approaches to scheduling, because many things kind of are like, well, this is flexible and it depends, and if this happens, then we could do, but if it doesn't, then we could also do, like if you have that kind of a structure, that requires a different scheduling approach than if you have a very rigid, this has to be done by this date in order for us to get this payment, which will fund the next stage, which needs to be done by this time. And these things need to be completed before these people can start their work. And right, that kind of a project exists as well too. Different type of scheduling. So project schedule management. Fourth, cost. I've sort of been using budgeting as a go-to example because money is a thing. But this is where all your accountants are, right? This is a knowledge area that people have: finance and budgets and allocations, and like if those are words you really like, then you probably have have some enjoyment around this particular knowledge area. Quality. Sometimes it's hard to define what quality means. I am currently learning video game development in my spare time, and what is quality when it comes to a video game? Well, generally fun. Okay, define fun. Like, what's fun? Fun for who? Like that is that is a more difficult thing to get a grasp on than quality in terms of if you're a jeweler and you can just say, well, how many carats is this gold? How pure is this gold? Or how pure is this silver? Or, how flawless is this diamond, or whatever, right? Like some things have sort of like a very clearly defined quality and other things don't. But those questions fall under the category, the knowledge area category of project quality management. Definitely if you're building a building, you want it to stay up, that's that's a quality question. Resources. So resources, according to the PMBOK, are separate category from costs. So resources are like your materials or your inputs, or if you have outsourced certain things that you do to other people, it's whatever they are delivering to you, whether that's a product or a service. Those are kind of resources. Okay, so this is half of the list: project everything management. I will take another brief pause to ask for questions. All right. I will continue then. Communications. Oh, uh, raise your hand. Well, I can't see most of you, but raise your hand alone in your in your room, wherever you are. If you have been involved with an organization or some other project where communications was a problem. Yeah, communications are always a problem. But you know, there are people that are good at that and people that also are not as good at that. And you want the people who are good at that in charge of project communications management. Um, and this kind of ties back to your initiation stage, because you want to know who those stakeholders are, and different stakeholders have different communication needs, right? The funder of the project might just want you know, a monthly or quarterly progress report. And the people for whom you are building the new thing may want to know something every week. Okay. And managing who needs to know what and what kind of information and what are they looking to hear, and what do they like and what do they not like, and all of those kinds of things fall into this project communications management. Risk. I recently had a had a conversation about risk with someone who said, you know, I was like, well, we know that, you know, here's the likelihood that this bad thing would happen, and that if this other thing increases, then the risk of this thing we're trying to avoid increases, and those have sort of a direct relationship. Um, for those that are into math, it's a ratio. Um, and this person was like, no, it doesn't work like that. You can't think of risk like that. I'm like, well, that is exactly how you think about it if you're a project manager. Um, because the PMBOK describes risk management as basically making sort of a grid that says, okay, well, how, you know, like for all the things that might go wrong, how likely is it that it will go wrong? And how damaging will it be if it goes wrong? And then you can kind of prioritize what you're going to, how much effort you put into avoiding those risks. So risk management is its own profession. There's a lot of stuff there, but it's useful to have someone looking out for those things, unless it doesn't really matter. I mean, like if you're putting together a potluck, you know, like, okay, you don't need a risk manager for for your potluck. You know, just like have people come over and be careful that you don't burn yourself. Okay, great. You know, ask people what their allergies are. Okay, cool. You know, but again, building a building or a bridge or you know, launching a new product, you probably should think about those things. Procurement. Procurement is kind of the integration of cost and resource. It is the ordering of things so that you have just the right amount and that it arrives in time for you to use it. Okay, so one of my very early jobs was working for merchandisers um, for a hardware chain. And so we had a lot of, a lot of people who were, their whole job was, buying this many hammers for this store and that much lumber for that store and, whatever. And so they were the project procurement management for the store, essentially. Shareholder, project shareholder management. This probably should say stakeholder, but these are, those communications that go out to the various people who care. There's a piece of that that is not just communicating, but making sure that the project is addressing their needs. Right? Their needs go beyond just communication. Making sure that they're happy goes beyond communication. Making sure that you haven't left anyone out is part of this. Okay, so stakeholder communication or stakeholder management is important. This might be like membership services for a nonprofit, or for a company that sells memberships, right? Those are stakeholders. Your customers are stakeholders. Your investors are stakeholders. And so this is one page from the PMBOK. This is the most useful page in the PMBOK. As you can see, across the top, you have all of our stages from left to right. And from top to bottom on the left, you have the knowledge areas. And within each little box where those two things intersect are a whole section of the PMBOK where they have ideas if you're not sure what to do. So as you can see, there are empty boxes. And some of those make sense. So let's see. Well, a project schedule management. It's empty in initiation. Well, yeah, because you haven't made the schedule yet. Scheduling happens in planning. Okay. And then once you've got the plan, in execution, the schedule, you're not doing any schedule during the execution part, although you do want to control schedule, which is managing the controlling. Right, so these kind of make sense as you think about the roles of each column and the roles of each row. But I'll just leave this up for a moment so you can kind of see the things that are spread throughout here. And each of these little, like I'll pick 11.4, perform quantitative risk analysis. Okay. There's a whole section in the PMBOK about doing that. Conduct procurements. Okay, there's a section about that. So if there's an area that you happen to know that you're not very good at, or that you're worried about, you're concerned that you might forget something or leave something out, or have no idea, well, this can guide you to the right section of the PMBOK to find that information. Okay. Any question about any of this? A pause for station identification. No. I see things in the chat. Was that just the links?
Yeah, that was me
Okay.
posting the links. I did find the Spanish language version of the PMBOK as
Okay.
an ebook, so that's available. Unfortunately, there wasn't a Vietnamese version in the collection, and I will ask our collection development folks if that exists in there, or so that they could try to buy it. I saw a couple different languages, and if it does, perhaps we could get it into the collection in that ebook collection in the future.
Cool. Yeah, I'm noticing down here in 13.4, monitor stakeholder engagement. Right? So keeping people involved is something that is not necessarily a communication issue. It's making sure, is this still something that we want to keep doing? Or has everyone gotten bored and wandered away? You know? All right, well, on we go. Communication and culture. I will probably not surprise anyone by saying that humans are complicated. And humans are different from other humans. And that makes project management in many ways difficult. It can be completely fascinating. So one of the things that I would do in my my classes at Seattle Central when talking about communication and culture is I would show a video of someone going person to person on the streets of Japan, asking people about two words that we don't really have in English. One is honne and the other is tatamai. And honne is the real, true, honest answer, what you really think. And tatamai is what you are expected to say given the social situation that you find yourself in. And so they went around, so this interviewer went around and asked people like, okay, so when do you use honne and when do you use tatamai? It's very interesting to see, like, even people that were interviewed together on the street would like, you could see that they were that they were playing with those two ideas because one wanted to answer, honestly, but recognize that the other person might expect something different from them. And and so there's a lot of stuff about communication and about culture, and how a group is composed that are really important in project management. So one pretty strong signal that comes out of research about group dynamics is that the more diverse a group, the harder it feels to get things done. However, very clearly, better results happen. So if you are working with a team or a group that is very much like you in many aspects, so we're talking race, gender, age, et cetera, right? All of those ways that people can differ from one another. The more they are similar, the easier it will feel to do the work, and the more subpar the work will be. So it's look for some degree of not necessarily conflict, but there should be disagreements. There should be, I don't think we should do it that way. I think we should do it this way because, rather than, oh yeah, we all agree. Let's all do that. Yay. Okay, next thing. Because if you're regularly experiencing that, you're probably experiencing groupthink, which is everyone being blind to the same things, and so therefore only seeing a narrow range of possible solutions. So, and speaking from who I am, a white man, if you are a white man and you're in a group and there's more than about 1/3 of the group that are white men, bring that up, because white men make up about 1/3 of the US population. So if you've got like 2/3 white men in the room, you probably can rebalance and represent the community better. So that's just kind of my rule of thumb is, you know, if you see that, speak up, because you could be having better results in your project by doing so. Okay. So this is a concept that sort of simplifies some of these issues. This is called the culture map, which some people have seen before, others may not have. So I'll just briefly go over it. This chart on the right has 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, 8 different aspects that are the most common areas for cultural difference. And in this case, the US is represented by orange dots, and India is represented by that bluish color, aqua. And so each of these aspects allow you to think about where conflict might come up. So, for example, on the first one, communicating is sort of on a scale from low context to high context. And in general, the US in particular, but sort of European, North American culture tends to be low context. That means that we like to communicate in a straightforward, clear, direct manner. We like to say what we mean what we say, leave nothing ambiguous. High context, on the other hand, is really, it's probably globally more common. So when I was a writing tutor in college, we got like these charts of different cultures and how different cultures write essays. And one of them was a spiral. They were like, and this was common in East Asia. And it was, well, you don't say, you know, in America, you say, okay, here's my point. Paragraph 1, here are the reasons. Paragraph 2, reasons for the second thing. Paragraph 3, reasons for the third thing. Summarize, this is my point again. Whereas Eastern Asia, it's a, you know, it's a spiral. It's like, well, we're going to talk about this thing. We're going to bring up this idea. We're going to hint at, we're going to, and over time you get closer and closer and closer until, well, of course, this is what we're talking about at the end. Right? That's high context communication. So you can look at each of those things, and there are links here that have more information. there's lots of stuff out there that you can find on the idea of the culture map. But this is just one way that you can see that, you know, if I'm going to be doing business with people in India, there are some significant differences between what I might expect doing things in America and how they are probably done in India. Okay. And you find these differences, you know, US versus, you know, Italy. um, you know, so it's truly is a you know, difference from culture to culture, but we tend to, you know, see more dramatic things the further out we go. An example of this, this is a picture I took in the Chengdu, which the tea capital in Anxi, China. And I went there as part of a tea trip and was asking about this particular type of tea that they are trading here, which is translated as usually Iron Goddess of Mercy, something like that. And I went around and ran into this merchant, and I said, "Yeah, I know that this tea that is most commonly traded now is sort of the green variety, but I understand that there's an older, more traditional um, type that is roasted, and it's a dark brown. Do you know anyone that makes that kind?" And he's like, "No, no, no, no one makes that kind." And I was like, "Okay." He's like, "But sit down and we can taste some different teas." And so I was like, "Okay, great." And we tasted some teas and talked to customers. And he's like, "What do you think of this one?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know. I don't think that one's not very good." And he's like, "Yes, you're right." And you know, he would, and we were building a relationship. And he was sort of like testing, am I really serious about this tea thing? And we spent almost all day sitting down talking about tea, just me and this guy that I just happened to run into. And then you know, it's getting later in the afternoon, and he's like, "Hold on, let me go into the other room." He comes back and he says, "Okay, so I have hired you a taxi that is going to take you to the guy that makes that traditional kind of tea that you asked for." So in the morning, he said, "No, no one does that." But then we built a relationship, and he saw that I was serious, and he came to trust me, and then he helped me get the answer that I wanted. I asked for that favor too soon before we had built that relationship. But it ended up working out because we spent that time together. Right. And that's how some of these communication problems happen, is not realizing that, yeah, sometimes it takes longer. Sometimes you have to do it a different way than you're comfortable with. But you can get what you want if you go through that process. Right? Understand what the other person is expecting and meet them. You know, halfway, all the way. You know, how important is the thing that you want to do with them, right? Oh, that probably should be where I should break this. I don't know why I don't have a question mark on there. Let me just sneak ahead here. No. Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to take a break before we go there. Any questions at this point? What's our time? We have half an hour. Okay. This will be fine.
Any questions?
We will have some time at the end for questions as well. And I don't know if we said this, but we will turn off the recording for anyone that was a little bit shy during the recording. So, keeping track. if we divide all of the methods of sort of keeping track of a project, they divide into these two categories. Water and dancers. No. The left represents what they call the waterfall method, or a waterfall method. And the right represents what is often called agile. And when we were talking about some of the planning and order versus chaos and flexibility versus rigidity, this is where it sort of comes out. This is where that rubber hits the road. So this is waterfall. Notice what we've got there. This is called a Gantt chart, G-A-N-T-T. And it has job numbers and task descriptions and the schedule across the top and dependencies, which are those little arrows that go from one line to the next, and color coding for the slack time that is often in doing a task, and breaks due to holidays, and this is how long the task normally takes, and these are milestones, and these are deadlines, and this depends on, and all of that kind of stuff, right? This is a very ordered way of doing things. And this is a great method if what you are doing is kind of a step-by-step process. This is done first, and then this is done, and then this is done, and then this is done. This is really common in things like construction. That's where I have heard of this being used the most, actually, is in construction. But anywhere where it's sort of a step-by-step, you can't build any walls until you have poured the foundation and the foundation has cured. You can't pour the foundation until you have cleared the lot, right? It's like everything is in a very specific order. Okay, and this makes something complex but still ordered easy to follow. Well, where are we? And this is where it gets the name waterfall, because it's like, well, yeah, stuff comes in at the top, and as you get things done, it just keeps going down and down and down and down and down. Okay, waterfalls don't flow back up again, you know, halfway through, right? They go over the edge and then they keep going down. But not all projects are like that. So agile, there are more different types of agile than there are waterfall. But this is the basic structure. So you have your plan, and different ways of doing agile call these things different things. But you have a pile of all the stuff that you think needs to get done. Some call it a backlog, some call it, you know, different things. But you have the whole stack of everything. And then you have sort of an iteration in the middle where you say, okay, well, where are we now? And what's the work that we can grab from that backlog, from that pile, that we can work on next? And then when that work is done, you pass it on, or you check it off, or you move it into the done category, or however you want to call that. And you release that work. Okay, we did that chunk, done. And usually there is a feedback loop that comes back so that you can sort of review where you are and readjust. Oh, the thing that we delivered last week, we got a bunch of complaints on. So this week we need to work on quality. And different Kanban is one version of that. I'm blanking on what some of the other ones are called. Scrum. Scrum is the other one that is really common. Sometimes this is called lean development, you know, because you're not adding on a whole bunch of planning processes. But the basic idea is, okay, we're working on this stuff in the middle. Done stuff goes out one side, and then we pull in some more stuff. Some do it in little chunks, like, okay, we're going to do a sprint where we take 1 week or 2 weeks and we say, okay, we're going to pull over into our current work only what we think we can complete in 2 weeks. We're going to do those 2 weeks, and then we're going to come back and review. Others are more like a continuous process where as something goes out, something else comes in. So it's more like a conveyor belt. But either way, this is much more flexible because it allows for that feedback while things are being done, and allows for adjustments. And it might be that some of that feedback comes back and you decide either to put more things on the backlog or eliminate things from the backlog based on the fact that you have delivered something. So you might develop an app this way. And so the first thing that gets delivered is the MVP, the minimum viable product, right? It is the smallest version of what you could produce. And you get people using that tiny version of the app, and you find out where it breaks, or you find out, you know, people say, oh, it would be really great if there were a enlarge button, or it'd be really great if you could close it by doing, or whatever. Okay, great. That goes on the backlog for you to do the next time. And you add those features and you push those out and you see what the feedback is. And then you develop more stuff and you push those out and you see what the feedback is, right? You can't build a skyscraper that way. You can't build a bridge that way. But you can build software that way. And that's where most of this kind of project shows up, is in those kinds of developments. And those are my images. So that is the end of my presentation. We do have 15 or 20 minutes for questions. I'm sure Jay actually has some things to announce. So I'm going to throw it back to Jay, and you can wrap it up in the way that you think is best, and then maybe we have the questions after.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Michael. And I just wanted to do a shout out to the upcoming events in this series. Next week and the week after, we have 2 more coming up, and so please register for those. And I have been behind in my work, so I haven't gotten all of those links to the recordings previously done, or of course tonight's out to you yet, but I do have those, and I will send them.
You haven't distributed the video that we are currently recording?
I'm so behind. Yes. So I will do that. I've just been behind on that. So that's coming to everybody who registered. And I also want to share, there are other workshops happening for entrepreneurs, and also a series of workshops for entrepreneurs and just folks that want to improve their credit scores. So we have a wonderful presentation by Tierra Bonds. It's a 3-part workshop. Tierra is going to share how to look at a credit score, how that affects you in whether you're trying to buy a car or buy a house or whatever it might be.
Get a business loan.
Business loan, yes. Those are all things that your credit score affects. And so Tierra is going to share about that, and also how to make change there, so that she is able to share how to manipulate your credit score so that so you can have a higher score and get a better rate on a bank loan or whatever that might be. So those are coming up. We also have personal one-on-one consultations with Tierra. There's a limited number of those that happen after that, so you can sign up for those, and those are coming up. I also want to share that we are going to be doing those with translation into Spanish too. So there'll be Spanish language translation built in for all of the workshops. And then if you'd like that, by request with the upcoming consultations too, just let us know if you want that. We can make that arrangement. And I think that was what I wanted to share.
Do you want to also plug the make an appointment with the librarian?
Yeah, we can do that too.
Because that's, I mean, I tell people all the time, clients that are at least here in the Seattle area, that like, do that, get information, because there's all kinds of stuff that,
yeah. So if you're trying to understand, questions like, if you're asking questions like, who's my customer for my market or my service, questions like, what are my competitors doing in this area, or what are some of the like high level trends that are happening in this area. Those are all questions that my librarians on my team get often, and we can help you figure out how to answer those questions and get some data to help you make decisions. So let us know if you'd like to do that. We have I'll put a link to where you can sign up for those sessions in the chat, and we're excited to have you sign up. Well, why don't we go ahead and turn off the recording, so that if there are some questions that people want to ask after that, we can. So if you're listening to this after the fact, thank you for being here, and we're excited to see you at some of the next ones.
Thanks.